to the Mad Wild West podcast. Kick your boots off and stay a while, because you're about to hear the stories lost in time from the people that lived and made the Wild West mad. Welcome back to the Mad Wild West. These are the headlines from the Weekly Arizona Miner, based out of Prescott, Arizona. We're reading from October 12th, 1872. The first headline reads, Died. In the town of Phoenix on Friday, September 27th, after an illness of 2 days, Cassandra, the youngest child of William and Fanny Smith. Cassandra was an interesting little girl, intelligent, pretty, affectionate, and the first American who died a natural death in this town. The community turned out on Saturday to pay the last tribute of respect to the dear departed at the grave of the Honorable C.A. Tweed, read from a chapter of Job, gave an address appropriate, and thanked the friends in behalf of the mourners. You notice it said, of natural causes, because in Arizona at that time, the Indian Wars were pretty much going on, and there were a lot of people that did not die of natural causes. So 1872, the first person that died a natural death in this town was Cassandra. So in the papers in that day, there were little tidbits, just little headlines, no explanations, nothing. I guess it's equivalent to us scrolling nowadays. But here's just an example, something simple, and then something that makes you question things. So here's just a little blurb. It says, on Sunday, G.H. Wilson brought a load of peaches from Wickenburg. That's all it says. Very mundane. Okay, guess it was a big deal back then. But then right under it says, the diamond fields are said to be within 6 miles of Phoenix. Diamond fields. So back then, around here, they were finding diamonds in certain areas. I'm sure that diamond field is built over by now, unfortunately. But if you live in the Phoenix area and you're 6 miles from downtown, you may want to dig in your backyard. The next headline reads, Indians and Their Doings. September 13th, about 30 Apaches attacked Aguilar and Berlero's men and teams between Crichton and E.N. Fish and Company sawmill, less than 2 miles from the military post. Andreas Borello's cook was instantly shot to death, and Mr. Wilson wounded by 2 shots in the shoulder and 1 in the neck. Aguilar had 1 horse and 10 mules stolen, and Berello lost 2 horses. The Apaches carried off and destroyed much property and provisions, and among the booty were 3 needle guns, 1 pistol, and 300 rounds of fixed ammunition. Lieutenant Hall, 5th Cavalry, and a party of soldiers searched for the savages and failed to find them, owing to the fact the lieutenant thought that they had gone up to Camp Grant Reservation. Of the same date, Chaz H. Keaton and another gentleman were fired at by Indians on the 19th at a point on the Gila River Road. 1 bullet lodged in some blankets upon which they were sitting, and the buckboard. The Indians had for several days previous been skulling around Oatman Flat. Parties of savages have recently been seen in Maricopa County. During the afternoon of October 2nd, as Peter Arnold and another man named Damon were returning in Arnold's wagon from Camp Verde in this county to their home on Beaver Creek, they were waylaid and fired upon by a large party of savages, when Arnold narrowly escaped being killed as a bullet grazed his jugular vein and another knocked the skin off his elbow. One of the horses attached to the wagon was shot in several places. The body and bed of the wagon were struck by several bullets. The attack was made near the crossing of Beaver Creek. Damon returned fire while Arnold attended to driving the team. The farmers in that area have stacked their grain close to their houses and stand guard of nights in order to prevent Indians from stealing it. George W. Hentz, who arrived here last Thursday afternoon, gave us the foregoing facts and the more pressing news that, on last Saturday morning, as Sergeant St. Clair and 3 privates of Troop I, 1st Cavalry, were returning to camp from the Mogollon Rim Mountains, they spied some savages and succeeded in killing one of them. Sunday night last, some Indians tried to stampede a herd of cattle in Williamson's Valley. Band of bad Wallapies are encamped near Newater, not far from Edinburgh. the Camp Grant Indians are behaving very badly. General Howard is figuring to get an interview with Cochise. Interesting. This headline reads, "Another man shot and killed." Sunday morning last, between the hours of 7 and 8 o'clock, citizens residing in northern portion of Prescott is how it's called in Arizona, heard the report of a shot coming from the direction of John Cox Ranch, which is situated on the eastern border of the village. And after a lapse of 15 or 20 minutes, Miss Cox was observed coming over the hill toward town. To the first person she met, she told how her husband had been shot by a Mexican. Immediately thereafter, Judge Fleury summoned and got together a jury, the members of which found Cox lying dead in the bedroom from the effects of a wound made by a pistol bullet, which had entered his shoulder and passed downward, lodging in the region of the heart. The Mexican was gone, and all that could be learned from Miss Cox was her husband, herself, and the Mexican had been drinking freely, and all of a sudden the Mexican commenced firing at her husband. She rushed in from the kitchen and tried to stop the Mexican from killing him, and was unable to do so. She also, it is said, stated that after killing her husband, the murderer fled, taking with him 2 guns and 2 pistols. Sheriff Bannon and his deputies scoured the hills in search of the alleged murderer, but failed to find him. His name is Jesus Nevius. He was resided here for several years past and had a fair reputation. It is a little singular that since the arrival of the woman from Sonora, Mexico in 1864 or 65, 3 men, her husband, have been murdered, 1 Mexican at Black Canyon, and A.G. Dunn, an American, and John Cox, the last victim, a German in Prescott. It is, of course, the earnest desire of all good citizens that the Mexican may be caught. This one reads, "Recovering." By letter from Mr. Goldwater, dated San Francisco, September 27th, we are informed that he is recovering from the bad wounds inflicted upon him by the Apaches near this place several months ago. He had suffered a great deal, but at date of the letter was able to walk around and expected to start for Arizona as soon as possible. The firm, which he is the head, had purchased several $1000s worth of goods for their store in Edinburgh and Phoenix. Just so you know, Edinburgh is not far, or is basically on the border of Arizona and California, off the I-10, crossing over the Colorado River. If you're ever driving that way, that's where one of his stores was. It says Morris Goldwater, son of Mr. Goldwater, is now a partner in the firm and may take charge of the business at Phoenix. He is said to be an exceedingly intelligent young man. This short statement here I find interesting. Says more relics. Mr. Banghart has again supplied us with a box full of prehistoric tools, utensils, bones, food, etc., which he recently excavated from ruins near his place in Chino Valley, 25 miles north of Prescott. They can be seen at this office. And the final headline for today, titled "The Indians." The Indians were at their old tricks, shooting at people, stealing stock and corn, yet Miss Arnold, the only white lady on Beaver Creek, kept up her stout heart and was firm in the faith that General Crook would soon undo all the mischief which they have done. There you go. News from the Mad Wild West, 1872. This episode from the 1800s of the Mad Wild West is brought to you by Red Star. It's trademarked. Cough Cure. Absolutely free from opiates and poisons. A prompt, safe, secure cure. For coughs, sore throats, headaches, influenza, colds, bronchitis, the croup, whooping cough, asthma, pains in the chest, and other afflictions of the throat and lungs. Price, 50 cents a bottle. Sold by druggists and dealers everywhere. People unable to induce their dealer to promptly carry it, they can write and receive 2 bottles, express charges paid, by sending $1 to the Charles A. Vulgar Company, Baltimore, Maryland, USA. We made it to the main story in the Mad Wild West. and I've got a treat for you today. We are going to be told this story out of the mouth of Kit Carson. I'm going to read this to you. It's written back in the 1800s, but I want you to take a second, if you got a chance, if you're at home, or when you get a chance, look up Pawnee Rock on Google Maps. It's in Kansas. Here's a little snippet of what was said about Pawnee Rock. It states, the trade with New Mexico via the plains was inaugurated in 1823, at which date the first train of wagons that ever traveled in that direction started from Boonville, Missouri. The route was directly up the valley of the Arkansas to Pawnee Rock, and for 50 years, until the advent of the railroad in this portion of Kansas in 1873, the trail of the freighters passed within 100 yards of the rock. For years, the idea of the possibility of the settlement of the great interior tract never entered the minds of even the most strongest believer in the future of that portion of our domain. But the extension of our vast railway system beyond the Mississippi forever determined the question of the settlement of the plains, which in 1872 reached as far as Pawnee Rock. The, quote, desert has disappeared, and in its place has risen one of the grand pictures of fertility and happy homes. As has been referred to in how Pawnee Rock was named, the remains of those who met their death in the vicinity of the rock are frequently plowed up in the spring and fall. So a lot of death was met here. Now, we're going to read from the author who had a chance to sit around a campfire with Kit Carson one night. So why don't you kick off your boots and join us around the campfire with Kit Carson on this harrowing adventure at Pawnee Rock. Pawnee Rock has probably been the scene of 100 fights, and a volume could be written in relation to it. Kit Carson one night some 15 years ago when he, Jack Henderson, Lucine Maxwell, and a couple of Apache Indians and myself were camped halfway up the rugged sides of Old Baldy in the Raton Range, told in his spectacularly expressive way, among the other border reminiscences, the following little story, the incidents of which occurred long ago. The night was cold, although midsummer, and we were huddled around a little fire of pine knots, more than 8,000 feet above the level of the sea, close to the snow limit. We had left Maxwell's early in the morning to trace a quartz lead that cropped out near the mouth of the copper mine worked by him, and night overtook us many miles from the ranch, so we concluded to remain on the mountain until daylight. We had no blankets and, of course, had to sit up through the long hours, and as it was terribly cold, made a fire, filled our pipes, and spun yarn to keep us awake. Our lunch that we had brought was eaten up about noon, so we were supperless. But a swift cold mountain stream ran close to our little camp, and we took a swallow of that occasionally, which served the place of a meal. Kit, the general, as everyone called him, was a good humor for talking, and we naturally took advantage of this to draw him out. For usually he was the most quiet of men in relation to his own exploits. The night was pretty dark, there was no moon, and our fire of dry knots blazed up beautifully every time the two Indians who appointed to this special duty threw a fresh armful on. The flames cast their weird and fanciful shadows on the side of the mountain, and contrasted curiously with the inky blackness all around below us, while far above we could see the dim outline of Old Baldy's sacred and weather-beaten crest, piled crag upon crag until they seemed to touch the starlit sky. For an hour or two, the conversation was confined to the probabilities of gold being found in paying quantities in the mountains and gulches of the range, and when the interest on the subject flagged, Maxwell, having made a casual remark in relation to some peak nearby, just discernible in the darkness, and connecting the locality with some trouble he had 10 or a dozen years before with the Indians, opened Kit Carson's mouth, and he said he remembered one of the worst difficulties a man ever got into. So he made a fresh corn shuck cigarette and told us the following about Pawnee Rock, which he said he had written up years ago, and that he had the paper containing it, which afterward he gave me, and which, with that Kit related orally that night, is here presented. Kit said, "It was old Jim Carson. Poor fellow, he went under a fight with the Utes over 20 years ago, and his bones are bleaching somewhere in the dark canyons of the range or on the slopes of the Spanish peaks. He used to tell of a scrimmage he and another fellow had on the Arkansas with the Kiowas in 1836. Jim and his partner, Bill something or the other, I disremember his name now, he had been trapping up in the Powder River country during the winter with usual good luck. The beaver was mighty thick in the whole Yellowstone region in them days, and Jim and Bill got an early start on their journey for the river that spring. You see, they expected to sell their truck in Weston, Missouri, which was a principal trading point on the river. They walked the whole distance, over 1,500 miles, driving 3 good mules before them, on which their plunder was packed, and they got along well enough until they struck the Arkansas at Pawnee Rock. Here they met a war party of about 60 Kiowas, who treated them on the rock. Jim and Bill were notoriously brave and both dead shots. Before they reached the rock to which they were driven, they killed 10 of the Kiowas and had not received a scratch. They had plenty of powder and pouch full of bullets each. They also had a couple of jackrabbits for food in case of a siege. And the perpendicular walls of the rock made them a natural fortification, almost an impregnable one. They succeeded in securely picketing their animals on the west side of the rock, where they could protect them by their unerring rifles. But the story of the fight must be told in Jim's own way. He was a pretty well-educated fellow. He had been to college, I believe, in his younger years, lost the gal he was going to marry, or had some bad luck or other, and took to the prairies when he was about 20. I'll try to tell it as nearly as he did as possible. He said after the darn Indians had treated us, they picked up their dead and packed them to their camp at the mouth of the creek, a little piece off. In a few moments back, they all came mounted, with all their fixings and war paint on. They were commenced to a circle around us, coming closer, Indian fashion, every time, till they got within easy rifle range, when they slung themselves on the foreside of their ponies, and in that position opened up on us. Their arrows fell like a hailstorm around us for a few moments, but as good luck would have it, none of them struck. I was afraid they would, first of all, attempt to kill our mules, but I suppose they thought they had the dead wood on us, and the mules would come mighty handy for their own use after our scalps were dangling from their belts. But we were taking in all the chances. Bill kept his eyes skinned, and whenever he saw a stray leg or head, he drew a bead on it, and Thug over-tumbled its owner every time with a yell of rage. Whenever they attempted to carry off their dead, that was the moment we took the advantage, and we poured it into them as soon as they rallied for the purpose with telling effect. We wasted no shots. We had now only about 40 bullets between us, and the miserable cusses seemed thick as ever. The sun was nearly down by this time, and at dark they did not seem anxious to renew the fight at night. But I could see their mounted patrols at a respectable distance on every side, watching to prevent our escape. I took advantage of the darkness to go down and get a few buffalo chips to cook our supper, for we were mighty hungry, and to change the animals to where they could get a little more grass, though, for that matter, it was nearly up to a man's head all over the bottom. I got back to our camp on top without any trouble, when we made a little fire and cooked a rabbit. We had to go without water, and so did the animals, but we did not mind the want of it so much ourselves, but pitied the mules that had none since we broke camp in the morning. It was no use to worry about it, though. The nearest water was in the spring at the Indian camp, and it would be certain death to attempt to get there without their seeing us. I was afraid the red devils would fire the prairie in the morning and endeavor to smoke or burn us out. The grass was just in a condition to make a lively blaze, and we might escape the flames, and we might not. We watched with eager eyes for the first gray streaks of dawn that would usher in another day, perhaps the last for us. The next morning's sun had scarcely peeped over the horizon when, with an infernal yell, the Indians broke for the rock, and we knew some new project had entered their heads. The wind was springing up pretty fast, and nature seemed to conspire with the red devils if they really meant to burn us out. And I had no doubt now from their movements that's what they intended. The darkness kept us at such respectable distance from our rifles that it chafed us to know that we could not stop the infernal throats of some of them with our bullets. But we had to choke our rage and watch events closely. I took occasion during the lull in the hostilities to crawl down to where the mules were and shift them to the east side of the rock, where the wall was the highest, so that the flame and smoke might possibly pass by them without so much danger as on the exposed other side. I succeeded in doing this, and also in tearing the grass away for several yards around the animals, and was just starting back when Bill called out, "Damn 'em, they fired the prairie." I reached the top of the rock in a moment, and took at a glance what was coming. The spectacle, for a short interval, was indescribably grand. The sun was shining with all the power of its rays on the huge clouds of smoke as it rolled down from the north, tinting it with glorious crimson. I had barely time to get under the shelter of a protecting point of the rock when the wind and smoke swept down to the ground, and instantly we were enveloped in the darkness of midnight. We could not discern a single subject, neither Indians, horses, the prairie, or sun, and what was terrible wind. I have never experienced its equal in violence since. We stood breathless, and clinging to the projection of our little mass of rock, did not realize the fire was so near, until we were struck in the face by burning buffalo chips that were carried toward us with the rapidity of the wind. I was really scared. It seemed as if we must suffocate. But we were saved miraculously. The sheet of flame passed us 20 yards away as the wind fortunately shifted the moment the fire reached the foot of the rock. Yet the darkness was so perfect that we did not see the flame. We only knew that we were safe as the clear sky greeted us behind the dense cloud of smoke. Two of the Indians and their horses were caught up in their own trap and perished miserably. They had attempted to reach the east side of the rock where the mules were, either to cut them loose or crawl up to us while bewildered in the smoke if we escaped death. But they had proceeded only a few rods on their little expedition when the terrible darkness of the smoke cloud overtook them. All the game on the prairie, which the fire swept over, was killed too. Only a few buffaloes were visible in that region before the fire, but even they were killed. The path of this horrible passage of flames, as we found out afterwards, was marked all along with crisp and blackened carcasses of wolves, coyotes, turkeys, grouse, and every variety of small bird. Indeed, it seemed as if no living thing it met had escaped its fury. The fire assumed much gigantic portions and moved such rapidity before the terrible wind that even the Arkansas River did not check its path for a moment, but we watched it carry across as if it had not been in the way. This fearful prairie fire traveled at the rate of 8 miles in 15 minutes and was probably the most violent in its features that ever visited this country. It was the most sublime picture I ever looked upon, and for a moment made us forget our perilous position. My first thought after the danger from the fire had passed was the poor mules. I crawled down to where they were and found them badly singed but not seriously hurt. I thought, so far so good. Our mules and traps were all right, and we were all right. So we took fresh courage and began to think we should get out of the nasty scrape in some way or the other. In the meantime, the Indians, with the exception of 4 or 5 left to guard the rock so we should not escape, had gone back to their camp on the creek and were evidently concocting some new way to capture or kill us. We patiently waited 2 or 3 hours for the development of events, snatching a little sleep by turns until the sun was about 4 hours high, when the Indians commenced in their howling again, and we knew they had hit upon something, so we were on alert in a moment to discover it. The devils this time had tied all their horses together, covered them with branches of trees that they had cut on the creek, packed all the lodge skins on these, and then driving the living beastwork before them toward us, themselves fall close behind on foot. They kept moving slowly but surely in the direction of the rock, and matters began to look serious for us once more. Bill put his hand on mine and said, "Jim, now by God, we got to fight. We ain't done nothing yet. This means business." I said, "You're right, Bill, but they can't get us alive. Our plan is to kill their ponies and take them to a halt." Bill, who was one of the best shots in the plains, kind of threw his eyes carelessly along the barrel of his rifle, and one of the ponies tumbled over the blackened sod. One of the Indians ran out to cut him loose, as I expected. I took him clean off his feet without a groan, quicker than it takes me to tell you this. We had stretched out 12 of them on the prairie, and we made it so hot for them that they got out of range, and they were apparently holding a council of war. We kept watching the devil's movements, for we knew they would soon be up to some founded trick. The others did not make their appearance immediately from behind their moving breastwork, so we both fired 2 shots apiece into the horses, killing 3 of them and throwing the whole outfit into confusion. We soon stopped their little plan, and they had now only the dead bodies of the ponies we had killed to protect them, for the others had broken loose and stampeded off to camp. It was getting pretty hot for Mr. Indian right now, who was on foot and in easy range of our rifles. We cleaned out 1 or 2 more while they were gradually pulling themselves out of range, when of course we had to stop firing. The Indians started off to their camp again, and during the lull in the hostilities took an account of stock. We found we had used up all our ammunition except 3 or 4 loads, and despair seemed to hover over us once more. In a few moments, we were surprised to see one of the warriors come out alone of the camp, tearing off a piece of his white blanket, boldly walking toward the rock. Coming up within hearing, he asked if we'd have a talk with him. We told him yes, but we did not look for any good results from it. We could not accept anything less than our torture if we allowed ourselves to be taken alive, so we determined not to be caught in any trap. We knew we had done them too much damage to expect any mercy, so we prepared to die in a fight, if we must die. We beckoned the young buck near and listened to what he had to communicate. He said they were part of White Buffalo's band of Kiowas, that the war chief who was here with them was Tun Sovar, which means a herd of buffaloes, and that he wanted us to come to the camp where we, heap brave, we should be kindly treated, and that his tribe would adopt us. They were on their way to Sioux country north of the Platte, and they were going there to steal horses from the Sioux. They expected a fight and wanted us to help them. Bill and myself knew the darned Indians too well to swallow their chaff, so we both told them we could not think of accepting their terms, and that we were on our way to Missouri and meant to go there or die in the attempt, that we did not fear them. God would take care of us. And if that was all they had to talk about, he could go back and tell his party they could commence the fight again as soon as they pleased. He started back, and before he reached the creek, they came out and met him, had a conversation, and then began the attack at us once more. We made each of our 4 loads tell. When we stood at bay, almost hopeless and defenseless, we were at the mercy of the Indians, and they understood our situation as quickly as ourselves. We were now thrown upon our last resource, the boys' play of throwing stones. As long as we could find detached pieces of the rock, they did not dare to make an assault, and while we were still wondering what's next, the white flag appeared again and demanded another talk. We knew now we had to come to terms, and made up our minds to accept anything that savored of reason, and our life, trusting to the future to escape if they kept us as prisoners. The Kiowas are not coyotes, and they know brave men, said the Indian. We will not kill you, though the prairie grass is red with blood of our warriors that have died by your hands. We will give you a chance for your lives, and let you prove that the great spirit of man is powerful and can save you. Behold, said the Indian, pointing with an arrow to a solitary cottonwood on the banks of the Arkansas, a mile or more away. You must go there, and one of you shall run the knife gauntlet. From that tree, 200 steps to the chief out toward the prairie. If the one who runs escapes, both are free, for the Great Spirit has willed it. The chief had said it, and the words of the Kiowa are true. When must the trial take place? Said I. When the sun begins to shine upon the western edge of the rock, replied the Indian. Say to your chief, we accept the challenge, and I will be ready, said Bill, motioning the young warrior away. I'm sure I can win, he said, and can save both our lives. The chief will keep his word. I know of him. Bill said, I shall run the race, not you. And taking him by the hand, I told him that if he saw I was going to fail, to watch his chance, and in the excitement of the moment, mount one of the horses and fly toward Bent's fort. He could escape. He was young. It made no difference with me. My life was not worth much, but he had all before him. No, replied Bill, my heart is set on this. I traveled the same race once before when the Apaches got me, and their knives never struck me. I ask this favor as my life, for I have a presentiment that it is only I that can win. I know how to get every advantage on them, so say no more. The sun had scarcely glided the dark line of the rock that juts out boldly toward the western horizon before all the warriors, with the chief at the head, marched silently toward the tree and beckoned us to come. Quickly, we were on the prairie beside them, when they opened a space and we walked in their center without exchanging a word. There were only 30 left of that band of 60 proud warriors who had commenced the attack on us the day before, and I could see by the scowls with which they regarded us and the convulsive clutching of their knives by the younger ones, it was only the presence and power of the chief that prevented them from taking vengeance upon us. As soon as we reached the tree, the chief paced the 200 steps and arranged his warriors on either side, whom in a moment stripped themselves to the waist, and each seizing his long scalping knife and bracing himself, held it high over his head so as to strike a blow that would carry it to the hilt at once. The question of who should be their victim was settled immediately, for I stepped forward to face that narrow passage of probable death. The chief signaled me back with an impulsive gesture not to be misunderstood, and pointing to Bill, told him to prepare himself for the bloody ordeal. In an attempt to protest, I was urging my most earnest words when the chief said he had decided and the young man must run, adding that even a drop of blood from any one of the knives meant death to us both. Each Indian stood firm, with his glittering blade reflecting the rays of the evening sun, and on each hard, cold face a determination to have the heart's blood of their victim. The case seemed almost helpless. It was truly a race for life. And as Bill prepared himself, I wished ourselves back on the rock, with only as many good bullets as the number of devils who stood before us. How well I remember the coolness and confidence of Bill. He could not have been more calm if he had been stripping for a foot race for fun. He had perfect faith in the result. And when the chief motioned to commence the fearful trial, Bill spoke to me, but I could not answer. My grief was too great. He stripped to his drawers, and standing there, naked from belt up, was a picture of the noblest manhood I ever saw as he waited for the signal. He tightened his belt and stood for a few seconds, looking with compressed lips down the double row of Indians as they stood face to face, gloating on their victim. It seemed like an age to me, and when the signal came, I was forced by irresistible power to look upon the terrible scene. At the instant, Bill darted like a flash of lightning from the foot of the tree. On rushed the Indians with their gleaming blades, yelling and crowding one another and cutting at poor Bill with all the rage of their revengeful nature. But he evaded all the terrible efforts, now tossing a savage here and another one there, now almost creeping like a snake at their feet, and then like a wildcat he would jump through the line, dashing the knives out of their hands, till at last, with a single spring, he passed almost 20 feet beyond the mark where the chief stood. We were saved, and when the disappointed Indians were crowding around him, I rushed in and threw myself in his arms. The chief motioned the impatient warriors away, and with sullen footsteps followed them. In a few moments, we slowly retraced our way to the rock, where, taking our mules, we pushed on in the direction of the Missouri. We camped on the bank of the Arkansas only a few miles from the terrible rock, but while we were resting around our little fire of buffalo chips and our animals quietly nibbling the dry grass at our feet, we could still hear the Kiowas chanting the death song while they buried their lost warriors under the blackened sod of the prairie. There it is, another horrifying story told about the Mad Wild West. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode and the crazy stories. And until the next episode, keep your horses tied up. Thanks for listening. The Mad Wild West Podcast. These are the true stories that made it wild.